Every stern drive that lives in the water has to be removed at least once a year to check the core components. I see a lot of videos about physically what to check when buying a boat, but what's more important is understanding the service history. It's not always clear what should and shouldn't be done, and you can have a boat that has just been serviced or been serviced on a regular basis, but maybe missing some of the core components. Before you even consider putting an offer on a boat or booking a survey, you need to research what should and shouldn't be done and at what intervals, as there's a number of things that can't necessarily be picked up on survey, but relate to the service history and can be found before you've even got to that stage. I'm going to break this video up into 5 parts. I'm going to start with stern drives, then talk about shaft drives, talk about petrols, diesels, and then anti-fouling and anode requirements. Let's start with stern drives. Every stern drive that lives in the water has to be removed at least once a year to check the core components. If you don't follow these guidelines, you can risk having a universals full of water and a gimbal bearing ready to fail. What you need to do is you need to look at the last time the stern drive was removed. Often you'll see in service history receipts that they've done a stern drive service where they've changed the oil and they've replaced the anodes, but this isn't an adequate stern drive service. What needs to happen is the stern drive needs to come off, these core areas inspected, and then it all put back together with new gaskets. If this hasn't been done at least once a year, you need to factor it in to being done straight away and expect that there can be more issues found when the stern drive gets pulled off. Another thing to look out for is when the bellows were last changed. As a general rule of thumb for a boat that lives in the water, 2 to 3 years is the most you're going to get out of your bellows. Another area to look at is the transom assemblies. If they're nearing 10 years old, you've got to assume that they're near the end of their life cycle. Additional issues can be found when you go to do a transom assembly, such as exhaust horn corrosion, which can't be assessed until the engine comes out of the boat. Usually these issues arise when you've had something that's been leaking for a long period of time. Moving on to shaft drives, thankfully they're less maintenance, but the 2 core components I'd be looking at would be shaft seals and rudder seals. I've seen them last for up to 10 years, but if you have a shaft seal fail or a shaft cooling line fail, the risk of what can happen is not worth taking. A lot of the time I see shaft seals leaking, and this can be partnered up to a previous accident where an owner's hit the bottom. What about petrol engines? Probably already heard this one, but manifolds and risers. If they haven't been done in the last 5 years and they're not shown on the service history, you've got to automatically assume that they're going to need to be done. If you've got to do manifolds, risers, and exhaust elbows on a twin engine stern drive, you could be looking at upwards of $7,000 just to start with. Another thing to look out for on petrol engines is if you go with a closed cooling system and there's a heat exchanger. If you've got a heat exchanger that's nearing 5, even 10 years old, you're likely going to have to change it in the short term or get it repaired. Lastly, the C pumps on petrol engines. They're a sort of 5-year item if you're lucky, and if there's nothing in the service history about them, again, if the boat's more than 10 years old, assume you're going to be doing them shortly. What about diesel engines? I always see people so smug that they're buying a shaft diesel and there's going to be less maintenance, but nobody says anything about the saltwater service. If you're buying a diesel, the manufacturer of that engine will dictate when the cooling system has to be serviced. Some are as low as 2 years and others sort of 4 or 5 years, but it's well worth finding out when it was last done. If there's absolutely nothing in that history in the last 5 years, you've got to automatically assume that you need to do it. I also see people ask this question and they get faced with, oh yeah, I gave the system a barnacle buster flush. This does not substitute a saltwater service. A saltwater service is removing the heat exchanger, the aftercooler, the oil cooler, and any fuel coolers, completely stripping them down, replacing all the seals, pressure testing them, and putting it all back together. If someone's just done a barnacle buster, what you'll find is they haven't pulled it apart and there can be internal corrosion, or there can, even worse, there can be a leaking aftercooler, leaking water back into your engine. You'll often see boats listed as just been serviced, but they didn't say that the cooling system has just been serviced. They're specifically talking about the engines and maybe even the generator. So you need to really be specific with that question when you ask it. The last thing on diesels is turbos. If the turbos haven't been removed and inspected in the last 5 years, you can have leaking exhaust elbows with water going back into the turbo. If you get to these before the elbow leaks, you can save a turbo. If you've got to do a turbo and an elbow, you're going to be up for thousands. The last thing is anti-fouling anodes. Much like a stern drive that needs to be pulled off every year, anti-foul and anodes need to be done every year. If you've got a boat that hasn't been done for 3-4 years, you risk the potential of anodes not being on that boat and corrosion happening underneath the water. You also risk the barnacle growth, which you're going to have to, one, get it off the bottom of the boat, and two, antifoul it straight away before you can start using it. Any boat that doesn't have history of antifouling and anodes in the last couple of years is a high risk item because there's going to be hidden defects due to this neglect. One of the other things people get confused with when talking about the service history is every 100 hours or 1 year. So it doesn't matter if you haven't done 100 hours, if your boat hits that extra year of age, you've still got to do that service as dictated by the manufacturer. You could have a cooling system that isn't overheating, but due to the age of it, could have an internal leak or some corrosion that nobody can see until it gets pulled apart. And that's why it's so important that these things are done on time rather than hours. To summarize, if any of these things in the service history aren't apparent, you've got to automatically assume that they're going to need to be done, and there may be extra problems found along the way and extra costs. So the best way going forward is to find a boat that's got good service history, or to request that it's done before you buy the boat. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you've got any questions with the service history, I know it can be quite confusing, feel free to shoot me an email below, and I'll be happy to help you out.